Bringing you the story on OTB Sports during the week about the FAI, Ger Gilroy speaking to Mark McSherry, definitely worth catching up on. Shane Ross was on also as well with us this week. It's finished, by the way, Waterford 0, Cork 0 in the League of Ireland Premier Division. So the FAI has delivered its fair share of politics and infighting and chaos over the decades. It's been a turbulent week for an association awaiting the full extent of a taxpayer-backed financial rescue package from the government, Sport Ireland and the Bank of Ireland, allied to support from UEFA and FIFA. And that's what we're talking about. This is our money, our taxpayers' money. So the previous administration ran up debts of €55 million. In January, independent chair Roy Barrett signed off on a memorandum of understanding with the government that has conditions attached for the FAI to access €30 million in funding from the state, not including the new money that was promised to the three major sporting bodies. Now, this memorandum has come in for criticism for two reasons. The first one is that there'll be 6 independent directors on the board from 12, and FAI council members with more than 10-year service would have to go. There'll be an FAI EGM in the coming weeks to vote on the memorandum. It must pass with a clear majority for the government to turn on the taps of money. Now, we've had this extraordinary week in Irish sporting governance. Now, for the first time at the FAI, where 8 board members issued their own statement criticising the interim CEO, Gary Owens. That's been patched up now. A nice press conference last night after a robust council meeting. Barrett and President Jerry McInerney putting up a united front. The 6 independent directors must stay. There may be a change in who casts a deciding vote in split decisions, but that's not in the memorandum. Look, these things can happen. We can have rows, but these rows are public. I suppose maybe that's the issue. The council members right now must go if they've served 10 plus years. That will be over a third of the council right now. This could be changed so it's based on what one would call a fit and proper persons test rather than it being time related. A lot of this is kind of technical, but I suppose we're dealing with taxpayers' money. We're dealing with an organisation that has seen a bit of infighting, and we're all hoping that they'll do the deal, they'll take the money, and that we'll be able to talk about football teams, players, coaches, grassroots, that kind of thing. So Roy Barrett was asked about the fractious few weeks and perhaps months, and the independent chair says resignation did not cross his mind.
One, have I ever thought of resigning? No. Okay, so firstly, I took this role on for a particular purpose, and we've got to see that through. And there's a good bit to go in all of that. As to how long I'll be here, I mean, I think I said at the outset to anybody in council, even who wants to listen, I'll stay as long as I think I'm adding value, and as long as people want me to be there. So if people wanted to call for my resignation, and that's what people wanted to happen, well then fine. But I'm committed to this, and I'm committed to staying for this, because there's an awful lot to be achieved here. Like we're only on step 1 here, and step 1 is actually just getting to a point of financial stability. That's only a starting point. There's so much more that we need to do.
What will be the next few steps in your own mind?
Next few steps in my own mind would, one is that the reputation and public profile of the organisation is really poor, and that needs to be improved. 2, we've undertaken a restructuring of the organisation from a staffing perspective. We need to see that bedded down and working. I have a high level of confidence that will be the case. There's some really good people in the FAI who are being given opportunities, and so I'd really like to see them grow, and as they grow, the organisation will grow. And we're a sport which is hugely underachieving relative to be it Gaelic or rugby on any sort of metric, and we should be doing an awful lot better. And success for us all will be that the game of football has a place which is much better than it currently has, and that will be good in so many ways, not only for the participants but also for the future funding of the organisation.
So that's the exclusive broadcast audio of Roy Barrett speaking, and sitting beside him was the President, Jerry McInerney, and Daniel McDonnell asked him at the press conference if this moment will pass.
The way I'd look at it is, I know the people in football that were here today in both rooms for many, many years. I know because I'm embedded into it. They'll go back, they'll reflect, and the one thing that football people always do, they can say what they like, they'll do the right thing by football. It might hurt them locally, nationally, or regionally, but they will do the right thing because that's what they do. So I would hope in this case they'll continue in that vein. I'd have every confidence. I've every confidence in the football community in Ireland. I always have. I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't. I wouldn't have put myself up for election if I didn't have confidence in the people in Irish football. They're good people, you know, very good people. Sure, I'm looking around at people. I can talk to John Duggan about Spurs.
Lovely for Jerry McInerney to name check me there, Daniel, as he did yourself, I'm sure, with Dundalk. I don't know if he did or not. But
I thought that was a bit bizarre, to be honest. But anyway, yeah.
So just on this, there seems to be a bit of a power struggle in the FAI over the last few months. Has this been put to bed now, the power struggle? Is this memorandum of understanding going to get approved at the EGM? Will the money then flow down? And then can we finally start talking about players, coaches, grassroots, and hopefully a bit of a stable financial structure for the FAI going forward?
I mean, you'd hope so. I mean, it is a tough one, this, to sort of navigate. Like, I was playing a bit of football earlier with, like, you know, lads who are involved and very interested in football, and they're not really following what's going on with this, you know, and it mystifies a lot of people, because I think, you know, with the FAI stuff, when you had, say, a very central, recognisable figure like John Delaney, it was very easy to, like, you know, to tell the story to some degree, whereas this one now is a bit more confusing for people to some degree, because there's various different factions and characters involved. And I mean, what it comes down to really is, you know, the definition of, like, ownership of the game and so on, and who runs the game, which is, like, you know, what people are very energized by here. And I think, you know, within football, that's obviously a very sensitive issue, you know, and a feeling that, you know, is there, by having half of the board independent directors, is this like a loss of control in some shape or form? But I think a lot of people outside of, say, that football bubble will look at it and say, well, the FAI, you know, the FAI created its own problems here. They view the FAI almost as just one, like it's like an inanimate object to some degree, you know, that they made their own problems and they have to swallow what comes with it now. And, you know, it's a bit more complex than that. It's not quite old v new. There's different camps and different groups and different opinions. But, like, the bottom line about it is, and it, you know, if you want to distill it very simply down to one thing, it's that, you know, Irish football is financially screwed, basically. And, you know, they need this funding deal to go through to, you know, to take it out of that scenario. And while some people doubt the extent to which, and Mick Wallace would have vocalised this yesterday.
We're going to hear from him in a moment, yeah.
Yeah, okay, well then I won't preempt that too much, but, like, they doubt that government would pull the plug in such a way that they would allow, like, you know, Armageddon sort of to happen. There is a sense. We
might as well just play that before you get to your point.
Mick Wallace, because I'll come back to that. Yeah.
Here's Mick Wallace now, who's a council member in Wexford.
There isn't an outcome yet. There's still going to be a vote. Look, it was an interesting meeting, and it was good that so many people spoke. I mean, it was probably more democratic than most meetings, but I do think that while most members disagree with the 6 and 6, which is given control to the independent directors, I think that they'll probably vote for it, because out of fear that the government will make the FAI insolvent if we don't give in to their blackmail.
Do you think there's no wiggle room then on the 6 and 6 and also the 10-year thing for the council members?
I think there would have been wiggle room on the 6 and 6, but I don't think the council are going to have the courage to actually stick it to the government.
Do you think that the fact that you're in the red for so much money leaves you with no other option?
I think they have options. I mean, soccer's been getting 2.9 million a year off the FAI. Horse racing in Ireland gets 77 million. Greyhound racing gets 16 million. It's a joke.
Mick Wallace there, the independent MEP. I'm just wondering, is the infighting over, Dan? Now?
Yeah. I mean, like, you can talk about last night, like, presenting a united front and so on, and, like, it is, you know, because we're so used to years of nothing being said, that I suppose when stuff happens, you know, maybe you seize on it so much, and, like, you know, disagreement is often healthy, and I totally, you know, I respect that argument. But what you've had this week is probably an unprecedented level of it. Like ultimately, you have a situation on Wednesday where 8 directors of the board are releasing their own statement, not through FAI channels, but through private emails. That they knew what journalists were at the press conference that day because very specifically targeted to them. To make a point that's, reacting to other members of the board. Like that's pretty unprecedented territory, really. And I mean, Jerry McEnany is involved in football a long time. People hear him there. He's quite an affable character, popular character, and he can charm a room and tell every journalist there where they're from and get some reference point. That's lovely, But the fact is that he wasn't involved in that. Something that obviously is has the potential to be pretty destabilizing and jeopardize things. And you can say one thing football people always do. They'll do the right thing by football. I mean, recent history would suggest that hasn't actually always happened in terms of the people who've been sent to represent, various sections of the game. And so let's not overstate that point here and be a little bit more realistic about what happened and what brought us to this situation. But I will say that the flip side of that as well is that there is no doubt that the new board people, and I don't want to get too dense into this, but there is no doubt that the new people on the board, it was Roy Barrett and the independent directors, and specifically Roy Barrett, they could have communicated and handled a lot of things better. There's big question marks around the signing of that contentious memorandum and the authority to do so. And Roy Barrett is there admitting that he got an email but didn't see it till the following day and so on. Like that's not great either. And just because you were that desperate that you needed the deal done, we have to accept that there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on the FAI's governance now because it was so bad for so long. So you have to do everything right, or else you leave yourself open to challenge and questioning. And they've left themselves open to very valid criticism too. But what we can't have is the stuff that we've had yesterday, prior to this very important council meeting. And this is just my personal opinion, that you have, all of a sudden legal threats and legal advice and letters and stuff being sent around, which is probably a bit more mischievous rather than necessarily I don't know, like, what is it serving? To what purpose is it serving? Like, what are we fighting for here? Are we fighting for, preservation of an old order? Or are we genuinely concerned about this sort of so-called takeover? Like, to me, the concept of 6 independent directors being on the FAI board at 12, like, it doesn't terrify me. I think I made this point to someone yesterday that, if this visionary group didn't exist, and there's no doubt that this background and this link between Roy Barrett and Gary Owens and Niall Quinn has made people, it's made people very wary because of their past relations, right? But I think that's also been seized upon by people to emphasise a point here, but strip it away and say the absolute concept of 6 independent directors on a board with 6 people from football constituencies, if they're all good board members and working together for a positive, common goal, I don't see how that should scare us. And people can say, yes, it didn't happen in other organisations and so on, but not many organisations have been governed like the FAI over the last period of time, and not many organisations have needed the level of bailout that they did. Now, I'm not saying there hasn't been valid points raised. Of course there has, and you can't be an apologist for that. But I'm just saying that, the extent of infighting that there's been, to go back to your initial question, which I've answered in a roundabout way, is the infighting over? I think it's still pretty deep-seated. I think that you will get this vote passed and you will get it through because you simply have to. I don't think the public will tolerate a scenario where, you turn down this money because you're worried about the composition of a structure which they think, and a lot of people think, has failed Irish football, even though the new board that's there now. And I want to make one important point here, which I think should be said. I think people who dip into it from the outside, they go, well, it's old v new and so on. It must be said in defence of the current board, the elected directors, that a lot of them, none of them were on the board last year. They're not the board members, that were there during the years where football ran into the crisis. And they deserve time to show what they can do to some degree. But you do have elements, I think, that are very supportive of them, that I would be a lot more supportive of their actions, that I would be a lot more sceptical about, because they are more so from the older guard, and that would be concerning.
All right, Daniel, well, that's very well summarised. I think From my perspective, having been there last night, there's a few things. There's probably a little bit of wiggle room. I would think, like the fact that the casting vote of the memorandum of understanding doesn't have to be, could be, changed. The rules of that by the FAI. It's not in the memorandum, so it's 6 versus 6, and there could be discussions around, if you've served actually more than 10 years, but you're still valuable to the FAI, that you could stay. So I think
that's what they're trying to do, John. Like a fit. It's a fit and proper person test.
That sounds like the Premier League here with clubs.
Well, yeah. I mean they're adopting it from FIFA. FIFA. I mean, what's happening with Gianni Infantino this week? Like you know what I mean? Like, unfortunately, football administration in itself, I don't know where the gold standard actually is. Like where do you look to? Where do you look to?
You look to is where you don't hear anything. I think you don't hear anything from the RFU, you don't hear anything from the GA. I think the key thing for me is not to hear anything from the FAI, not to really know who these people really even are. But Roy Barrett, to me, like from just my own observation, personal opinion, he came across very strong last night at that press conference. This is the way it is. It's going to be 6 directors, or we don't get the deal. And also, this is what I think we need to do, as you heard in that clip, as an organisation going forward. To me, this guy came across strong, and he's sticking around.
Yeah, no, like he is sticking around, and like from all accounts of people that were in the meeting yesterday, he did come in for some pretty strong criticism, and and so he should, like that's actually that's the way that it should be. And as I said, there is still question marks around the timeline, the process, the chronology of everything that happened. Now, his viewpoint is basically, if you want to summarize it, the FAI was absolutely screwed. They needed the funding, and he felt that he had the mandate to go and do whatever was necessary. The counterpoint of view to that is he agreed to things that would be very hard for the membership of Irish football to tolerate, and that's really it in a nutshell. But when you have this timeline being dissected 6 months on in such a way that it might jeopardise the passing of a rescue deal, it's harder, I think, to get on board. But yeah, Roy Barrett, listen. As I said, if Roy Barrett again hadn't been, a signatory or linked or listed on that, on the visionary group, I wonder would the perception of him be different. Now, he is coming from outside football. He is someone who, while I all understand, is a football fan. I think he went to Blackrock, which is a real rugby school, but he's a football fan. And he has this view externally of how it should operate, and he is applying that here. And I guess to some degree, I think, there's possibly, people have taken an offence and feel that some of the new people coming in they don't necessarily have a massive amount of, I wouldn't say respect is the wrong word, but they're more inclined to dismiss
they haven't earned their stripes. Is that almost this kind of stuff? Like, is that a little bit patronising?
I think the danger is that it comes across that way. Like, there are, as I said, there's some very capable people on the FAI board at the moment. Whereas before there would have been question marks about how board seats, like it was like a testimonial service going on to the board. Whereas it's a bit different now. And as I said, the communication and like the how it's actually operated, it hasn't worked well. But I think Roy Barrett in isolation, and he's only in like a very short period of time, and he can't just be taken in and declare something. Yes, this is the person, because we've made those mistakes in Irish football before. But I think he comes across well personally. I think in the meeting yesterday, from what I hear, like Nixon Morton, who is someone who has been, a delegate from the FAI schools, who was responsible for, the initial challenge, I guess, and sent out, has been getting legal advice on certain things. I gather yesterday Nixon Morton stood up and had his say, and Roy Barrett, there was a back and forth. I think Roy Barrett was quite calm and composed, as it was put to me. He didn't raise his voice at any point and was ready for everything that came his way. But I think he has actually taken a conscious decision to not seek publicity, not to seek limelight, not to do interviews or anything like that. But maybe, unfortunately, where the FAI is at, and I do agree with exactly what you said there, by the way, that we don't need to know who these people are, but the FAI has become such a circus that you almost have to get involved in that. And Roy Barrett, to some degree, like we've seen Gary Owens and Niall Quinn doing a lot of press stuff, and I guess they haven't always, they've at times, I think they've they've said stuff which maybe has come back to hurt them a bit to some degree. And actually, Roy
well, the
Barrett,
streaming, and that was like it came up on the streaming a few months ago. There was criticism, and now it's doing well, isn't it?
No, it is. But I guess what I'm saying, like Gary Owens the other day, used a phrase that just caused problems in terms of it prompted a statement about the extent to which I think he used the word that they had signed off on the deal. And I'm just saying that Roy Barrett doesn't want the attention and the publicity. He releases the odd statement, but actually I think when he faced up to the room yesterday and actually faced people, it seems like he made a better impression than he has done in terms of some of the statements that have been released. I guess that's my point there. So this is only new. There's new independent directors there who've only been in for a couple of months, and what we need is to take a breath, but it feels like there's no time to take a breath, and it's relentless. And I have to say, and I'm sure people are listening to this now, just like, oh, what's going on with all of this? And it's draining for everyone. It's really, it's really draining. But at the same time, the governance was so bad for so long that you probably have to just get everything right as well, too, to rebuild confidence and trust. But for people who are just playing the game and coaches and involved, it's very, very frustrating. But you just can't rewrite history as well, and some of what's happened too. You have to accept that Irish football was in a very unique position. So you can talk about the examples of other organisations and what's happened to them and this and that, but we were in real bother here because of really, improper stuff that was happening. And as a result, football has to accept that there's going to be some external role in what they do for the foreseeable, because they have provided the money to keep the show on the road. That is going to happen.
Stephen, are you drained from the conversation?
No, I'm actually just reading little bits and pieces about the meeting while Dan's talking. Again, it's crazy, really. I think it all stems, like Dan mentioned there, from the kind of previous regime. And again, but if you want the bailout, you're just going to have to kind of come to an agreement to get this going forward. Otherwise, ultimately, the funding won't be there, and without the funding, God knows what happens to the FAI. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. They all seem to be back on the same page again, reading the bits and pieces again. But maybe that's just to kind of get the deal over the line. But it just all needs sorted quick, because I think everybody's just fed up listening to it. We want to talk about the football again, like what's happening in the League of Ireland, the international team. And I don't know, Dan spoke there for, 20 minutes or so about this meeting. And yeah, it's interesting. People want to know what's happening. But ultimately, the football supporter just wants to concentrate on the football. They want to be in a position again where we can go and football fans go and support our national team, go and support our League of Ireland teams. We're not having to worry, is the game in trouble? Is there going to be funding there to kind of continue this? So no, it needs to kind of come to a conclusion soon.
Yeah, Stephen, you can tell me you were bored. I'm not offended by it. I actually think that a lot of people are bored of it. The situation, John, you were there yesterday.
Well,
Go on, John. Sorry.
I think the reason why we're talking about it, and the reason why Ger and has been speaking with Mark McSharry, Shane Ross, and all this, it's taxpayers' money first of all. So there is a stake in this, right? We don't want to see a black hole of 55 million, but we're also talking about it because I want to get across. I don't know about you, Dan and Stephen, that we had enough of it. Don't want to be talking about it anymore. So will you just please sort it out, get your deal, park your egos, get your deal done, agree what the government have generously, given you with the banks, with UEFA, with FIFA, with Sport Ireland, and just get it sorted. And we don't want to hear about it again. As I said this last night on the show, we had a great coaching panel with Pearl Slattery, Niall Regan, Jason Donoghue, people doing great work in football around Ireland. We got a League of Ireland that's probably in the best position it's been in for a long time. We got a streaming service that's working. We got Bohemians, Rovers, Dundalk involved. We got European football, and this is actually we've been able to get football off the ground during a pandemic. So
I would say, John. I mean, I think actually I would take a slightly different view that in some respect, the League of Ireland actually isn't in the best position it's been in for a long time. But this is what we need to address. This is what we need to address. We are in the Red Cow yesterday for 7 hours, right? And during there was a couple of things during that time there, Bows and Dundalk were playing a game. Now it's an unusual year. It's 5:45 or whatever. Really, actually, I was trying to watch a fair bit of a sort of really enjoyable game. Finn Harps, the Finn Harps players were there. They were sort of mingling around the lobby because that was where they went for their pre-match meal before the game with Pats. Now, I was up in Finn Harps on Tuesday. I did a piece in the paper today about the struggle of Finn Harps. And Finn Harps are a Premier Division football club you know, in the League of Ireland, who at the moment, like, you know, who are trying to get into a new stadium that I went to see the other day, that the building work has been ceased, you know, hasn't happened since 2011. At the moment, like, they were very, very excited because they put a lot of fundraising work into it at Finn Harp the other day to get these new dressing room changing facilities and porta cabins, because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to play in Finn Park due to the COVID protocols, because their ground is so old and dilapidated and broken and inadequate. I don't know if Stephen was up there, but like the dressing rooms, you know, and Stephen would know the draw the dressing rooms or whatever, you know, you wouldn't even find a cat big enough to swing, you know. So what I'd say, John, is that
I meant the quality of the football is what I meant.
That's the focus we need that's the focus we need, you know, to get back to. And like, this is the Premier Division. Sorry, like Finn Harps are getting like dressing rooms from a primary school porta cabin. They had to buy some units from the local GEA just so they could get some kind of acceptable changing facilities for their players in 2020. And they're in the Premier Division. And like, for years, you know, we've had a lot of fluff around what we're doing with football, and there are clubs in the country whose facilities have improved, by the way, but we just haven't had that focus to get like the senior level of our game right. And I think a lot of people see some of this infighting and read about this stuff, and they almost just go, well, that's Irish football fire. What a shit show that is, almost. And that's almost the focus. Whereas now, like, we need the next decade to be about addressing these problems like Finn Harps and these clubs who need facilities, and getting the brains. And you mentioned the coaching panels and stuff. Like, there's a lot of great people working in football in Ireland, a lot of great minds, but they're all operating independently, looking in different circles. And we need to just pull it all together, get over this period of turbulence, and like make the next decade about progress. Because unfortunately, Brian Kerr said it during the week, that the League of Ireland's probably gone, you know, maybe the image has improved, but I think, you know, some of the levels of it have gone back in the last couple of years. And Stephen would have been there, you know, playing in a top division where there's just really diverging standards and so on, and we need something better here. We can't avoid it. And meetings for 7 hours, you know, that can't be our story in 5, 10, 15 years, because a lot of what's going now is just a repeat of Night of the Long Knives and all the stuff we grew up hearing about.